الذين يقاتلون في سبيله صفا كأنهم بنيان مرصوص وإذ قال موسى لقومه يا قوم لم تؤذونني وقد تعلمون أني رسول الله إليكم فلما زاغوا أزاغ الله قلوبهم والله لا يهدي القوم الفاسقين وإذ قال عيسى ابن مريم يا بني إسرائيل إني رسول الله إليكم مصدقا لما بين يدي من التوراة ومبشرا برسول يأتي من بعد اسمه أحمد فلما جاءهم بالبينات قالوا هذا سحر مبين صدق الله العلي العظيم.
Jazakumullah khair, Brother Saeed, and thank you for always being prepared to help us and bring the light of Quran to the Majlis. As I was calling it short and inviting earlier, alhamdulillah, we have the blessing of Shaykh Shafar's company and guidance, so please with 3 loud salawats invite him to the member, inshallah. Allahumma
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين الحمد لله الأول قبل كل أول والآخر بعد كل آخر ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين أرواحنا له فداء أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وجعلناهم أئمة يهدون بأمرنا وأوحينا إليهم فعل الخيرات وإقام الصلاة وإيتاء الزكاة وكانوا لنا عابدين صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد وعلى محمد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Jameel Mu'mineen Mu'minat. First and foremost, I give my condolences to the Imam of our time, Imam Zaman, Ajjal Faraj al-Sharif, for the shahadat of his grandfather, Imam Ali ibn Muhammad Al-Hadi, alayhi afdal salatu wassalam. And then I give my condolences to each and every one of you. Imam Hadi, alayhi afdal salatu wassalam, as Ali mentioned, unfortunately sometimes we don't know much about his life. And that is not because his life was insignificant or there's not information about the life of Imam Hadi. No, there's information about the life of Imam Hadi. But as I always state, that when we reflect upon the lives of the Ahlul Bayt, alayhim afdal salatu wassalam, it shouldn't be a reflection or simply a skimming or just reading the history that Imam was born at this date, he was shaheed at this date, this is when he left from Medina, went to Baghdad. Yes, all of those details we can understand, we can have, and they're just basically data points. But when we examine the life of Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdal salatu wassalam, we need to take into consideration the totality of their life. That not only these data points, but also what was happening around there in their time. What their hadith was, what they expressed, their du'as were. As I said, Imam Hadi alayhi afdal salatu, when we celebrated the birthday of Imam Baqir and Imam Hadi alayhi afdal salatu, we mentioned that there were two very beautiful ziyarat that we have from Imam Hadi. One is the ziyarat of Al-Hadi, the other is ziyaratul Jami'ah, and both very significant. But when we look at and at least we compare what is happening during the time of Imam Hadi alayhi afdal salatu, and we reflect upon those ziyarat, we come to understand that definitely those ziyarat that the Imam he gave, and even the du'as, one of those du'as inshallah we will mention tonight, that they were reflective of the time that he lived in, that what was happening during his lifetime. But also as we read and we reflect about the life of Imam Hadi alayhi afdal salatu wassalam, one of the things that we can at least extract and draw from is that Imam Hadi alayhi afdal salatu wassalam, he presents to us a very good role model, one in which we can take as parents, and definitely our youth, they can look towards as well, to understand that how, as parents, how we should cultivate our youth, how we should cultivate our children. And the youth themselves, that how at a young age they themselves should be, or their objectives, their direction in life. Because Imam Hadi alayhi salatu wasalam, he presents to us a very good model for youth leadership. And this is because Imam Hadi alayhi salatu wasalam, he was one of those imams, one of the few imams who became the imam. He came across this position at a very young age, at the age of about 7 years old, 7 or 8. Like Imam Jawad alayhi salatu wasalam, Imam Jawad was also around 7 when he became the Imam. Imam Hadi alayhi was also around the same age, 7 or 8 years old when he became the Imam. And a few just kind of quick points that we can reflect upon the life, and of course, because of the time constraints, we're not going to go into too much details, but we'll give some examples, especially from the life of Imam Hadi alayhi. But one of the things that we see is that, yes, in his time, his lifetime, even at that very young age of 7, there was a lot of pressure. There was a lot of social pressure during that time. And he lived under some of the worst khulafa of the Abbasids. But under that pressure, the Imam, he remained resilient. He remained steadfast in his objective and his goal. One of the things that also Imam Hadi alayhi he did, he developed this system, and it was a very intricate system of wakalat. Sometimes even as our youth, and just to understand this idea, this concept of wakalat, that you are delegating others. Yes, you have a responsibility, but sometimes, and you have multiple responsibilities, but sometimes you say that, well, I can do this, but there are other things that I may not reach, I may not get to. And then what do? You delegate. So Imam Hadi alayhi he is the one that, as many of the ulama, they state, and when they examine their life, they said that he is the one who kind of really put this system of delegation or of wakalat or power of attorney into place. And he did so for a good reason. On one hand, this was something that Imam Zaman Ajfar al-Sharif in the Ghaybatul Sughra that he used, that he had the wakala, he had the 4 wakils, the 4 representatives that had power of attorney who acted on behalf of Imam Zaman Ajfar al-Sharif. But Imam Hadi alayhi he's the one who used this very strategic during his lifetime. And it's not bad for us to also understand some aspects of this concept of wakala. Perhaps it may come in handy for ourselves as well. So one, and these are just some very general ahkam. So one, to place somebody as your wakil, first of all, something that is allowed, something that's permissible, something that may be necessary also at times. Because there may be times that, I can't fulfill this duty, or I can't fulfill this responsibility, so I have to make somebody my wakil. For example, if a person reaches an elderly age, and that individual becomes what they call mustati', is able to make the Hajj, or at least financially becomes at a point to make the Hajj, but physically they can't make it. And this is like perhaps one of the only actions that may be obligatory upon yourselves, that while a person is alive, they can make someone their wakil to go to Hajj on their behalf. So that person performs those actions, those duties. Why? Because physically you can't. Financially you're able. But you appoint someone to do that. So this is one of the ideas and concepts of wakala. So to make someone your power of attorney as well within the ahkam, it's not necessary that you actually recite a particular formula. That you have to say, okay, I made you my wakil. No. If those 2 individuals, the one who is given the power of attorney and the one who is accepting, so there has to be one person giving, one person accepting. If, even without saying, they themselves understand between themselves that, yes, one is given the wakalat, the other is accepting the wakalat. And of course, it's good to have shuhud. You may want to have witnesses there so that it can be also verified. Quite often in a marriage that happens, that when the sheikh or someone else is given the power of attorney, the wakalat, to recite the aqd on behalf of the bride and groom. But as long as it is understood and it's very clear between the 2 individuals, then that wakalat is possible. So that wakalat also, upon death, it ends. Wakalat, the power of attorney, also can be withdrawn from that individual at any time. So if a person gives that wakalat, they can say, you know what? I don't want to give wakalat. Or if that individual says that, you know what, you've gave me wakalat, I no longer want that responsibility. So that wakalat can be ended at any time. One of the things that also aspects, and again, this is one of the, you can say, beauties of Islam, or actually the hikmah and the wisdom of Islam, as we see that Imam Hadi alayhi, and this is thousands of years ago, that he implemented this idea or concept of wakalat very strategically. Of course, it is in the ahkam, even within the Quran, it has its foundation from the time of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But in our ahkam, that wakalat doesn't rest upon gender. There's nothing that says that, oh, a woman cannot be wakil or wakila of someone else. Yes, completely allowed. But when we look at Western law, actually I was reading an article the other day where there was a case, they were comparing a case that was in the 1100s within the Muslim court and a case that was in the 1800s of Western courts here in America, actually in Britain as well. And they were showing that in 1100, that the wakalat was in the hands of a woman to do certain things. In Western law at that time in 1800s, this is like 700 years later, actually 900 years later, they didn't even have this concept that a woman had such wakalah, that she had the ability, and that's what they said, she doesn't have the ability to be wakil, to take that power of attorney and to act on her own behalf, her own accord. If she's married, it is her husband that acts on her behalf. If she's not married, then her father or her brother or whoever is alive, the male in that family. SubhanAllah. This is something that's thousands of years ago. That when the Quran was revealed, that this idea and this concept of wakalat could be placed in the hands of women. But only later, thousands of years later, this comes to the minds of Western law. That, oh, well, it's possible. So Imam Hadi alayhi hafidh, as I said, that he presents us with a very great model for youth leadership. And he does so in a time in which, as I said, it was very difficult political times. And Imam Hadi alayhi hafidh, he lived during the lifetime of a few of the Abbasid Khulafa. And among the most difficult of those Abbasid Khulafa was Mutawakkil. The things that was known about Mutawakkil, and again, this, what I'm mentioning is not from our resources. In fact, even if you go to any academic source, they will say this, that one of the things that Mutawakkil he was known for is that he arrested a lot of people. For any reason, that if he was upset, he didn't like individuals, so he would arrest them. Mutawakkil, again, he brought about a lot of changes, like during his Khilafah, that when he took over after his father, that he began to incorporate, again, some of the, as I say, the Atrak, some of the Turks, bring them into his governance. In fact, they were the ones that helped him solidify his power. And he implemented a very tight and rough regime. In fact, he was responsible for the execution of many of the believers, especially among the followers of the Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu wasalam. So either he would arrest people, he would exile them, or he would kill them. One of those things that he would do, that if someone went to make the ziyarat of Imam Hussein alayhi salatu wasalam, that this was subjugated to people to arrest, to exile, and then at one point he says that, well, anyone who goes, their limbs will be cut. So you cut their hands. You cut their feet. Sometimes people will go and one hand is missing, and you say, well, because they will cut the right hand, because they say, okay, people will perhaps work with their right hand, and they cut the left hand. There's a case where it says, one person says, look, you've taken my hands, all I have is my feet, my toes. This was the extent of the harshness of Mutawakkil. And this is also why one of the reasons that Imam Hadi alayhi hafidh will indicate this at the end, the dua that Imam Hadi alayhi hafidh recited against Mutawakkil. He eventually also destroyed the shrine of Imam Hussein alayhi hafidh, that he destroyed it. So this is the environment that Imam Hadi alayhi hafidh, he lived in, and that's politically, but even ideological. Mutawakkil, he was someone who broke with what was established, even by, again, the other Abbasids. So for example, Ma'mun, and of course we know Ma'mun and his atrocities. But Ma'mun at one point, even when you look at, actually Suyuti, he writes this about Ma'mun. He says, among He does acknowledge his atrocities. He says, but among the khulafa, he said, if you take all of the khulafa, at least of the Umayyads, and you take the khulafa of the Abbasids, he said the one who was most knowledgeable was Ma'mun. In fact, Ma'mun, of course, he's the one who established the house of wisdom, Baytul Hikmah. Of course, and that was Baytul Hikmah, the house of wisdom, was in opposition to the house of Imam Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam. That Imam Ali ibn Musa Rida alayhi salatu wasalam, he, that he was also the one who ran it until Ma'mun summoned him to Khurasan. But he says that if you look, the one who was most knowledgeable among the Khulafa was Ma'mun. And Ma'mun, one of the things he did, at least ideologically, he implemented or at least established the theology of the Mu'tazila. The theology of the Mu'tazila, as this is the official ideology of the government. And of course, as we know that there are certain overlaps between our ideology and the Mu'tazila. Not much, some aspects. One of those aspects is what? Al-Adl. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just. So, Al-Mu'tazila is what? Adiliyya. Shia, we also Al-Adili. We believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just. That He will not punish someone who is a righteous person, a Nabi, nor will He send to paradise someone who is mulhid, someone who doesn't believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So that is kind of in a sense, why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is just. Mutawakkil, on the other hand, what he promoted was the ideology of Al-Hanabila, the Hanbalis, which on some extent, to a great extent, they are literalists. And the Hanbalis, their ideology, of course, is a legal school of thought, but it is also connected with a theology as well, that they believe in Jabr. They believe that, oh, well, if this has happened, if someone cut your hand, that's what Allah wanted. Or if Allah wanted to place a person, a prophet in hell, then it's Allah's prerogative. He can do that if He wants. He wants to place a mulhid, someone who's an atheist, doesn't believe in Allah, in paradise, then Allah can do that. So this is what Mutawakkil he promoted. He promoted the ideology of the Hanabila, al-Hanbali. And of course today, it is the Wahhabi ideology, at least theology, that connects with what? Al-Hanbali. They're Hanabila. So this is the situation which Imam Hadi alayhi wasallam he lived under. One of the other things, just so we can understand that pressure and oppression that existed, Mutawakkil, he also appointed one of the chief judge by the name of Yahya ibn Akram. And one of the things that Yahya ibn Akram he did, he introduced this concept of ghiyar. That really interested, he kind of solidified it, I would say, because it existed a little bit during the time of Harun al-Abbasi. He kind of implemented it, but it didn't kind of stick, but Yahya ibn Akram, or Aktham, he made sure that this was the case. And what was that? The ghiyar, that they forced those who were Christian and those who were Jews to dress in a particular way. So, okay, well, in the society, we want to make sure that, we can identify them, that, everyone who's a Christian, everyone who's a Jew, they have to dress this way, or they have to dress that way. And this is something that was established under the Abbasid Khilafah. Something we never see that the Ahlul Bayt alayhim that they have talked about or implemented. This particular idea, eventually when you trace this idea and this concept of the ghiyar as well, you'll find that it was also implemented in Europe. And where did they get it from? From the Abbasids. So at one point they made in Europe, Christian Europe, they made the Jews wear particular badges. So okay, this person is a Jew, that person is this, to make this distinction. So this is a climate, both politically and ideologically, that Imam Hadi alayhi salatu wasalam, that he lived under. So as I said, he's the best example for youth leadership. On one hand, as I said, that he was resilient under all of these things, because especially our youth today, when they look at the political climate, They see what's happening in Palestine. They see what's happening in Lebanon. They see what's happening all over the world, especially lots of the places of the Muslim world. So they have to understand that, well, look, our Imams, they also face those challenges. But how did they remain resilient? What were their qualities? What were their characteristics that made them, again, remain steadfast and firm? One of those characteristics and one of those traits that is mentioned within the Quran, but also it is pointed to in the ziyarat of Imam Hadi alayhi salatu wasalam. And what is that? As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَجَعَلْنَاهُمْ أَئِمَّةً يَهْدُونَ بِأَمْرِنَا. So of course, that as we lead, of course, our leadership and our responsibility as leaders are different than that of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wasalam, but we take our guidance of leadership from them. So the first criteria is that we guide by the amr of Allah, the command of Allah. What Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, is halal, what is haram, what is obligatory, what is prohibited. That this has to be our criteria. وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَيْهِمْ فِعْلَ الْخَيْرَاتِ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He inspired them, because we mentioned these before in our speech a couple of days, He inspired them to do what? To do good. Imam Hadi alayhi salatu in the Ziyarat al-Jami'ah, there's one part where he says, إِنْ ذُكِرَ الْخَيْرِ كُنْتُمْ أَوَّلَهُ. It says that if good is mentioned, then who is the origin of that? Who's the first to do that good? كُنْتُمْ أَوَّلَهُ وَأَصْلَهُ وَفَرْعَهُ وَمَعْدِنَهُ وَمَأْوَاهُ وَمُنْتَهَى. Imam Hadi alayhi salatu, he says that when you make that ziyarah, that what is the maqam of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salatu? What is your trait? What is your characteristic? It says, if good is mentioned, if one even thinks of good, then who should you think about? The Imam alayhi salatu. Of course, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But the Ahlul Bayt, kuntum awwalahu, you're the beginning of that good. Wa aslahu, you're the origin of good. Wa far'ahu, you are the branches of good. In other words, whatever stems forth from what you do is good, because you plant the seed of goodness. Wa ma'dina, you are the treasure of good. Wa ma'awahu, and the place of good, wa muntaha, and all good ends at you. And this is, again, it coincides with one of those statements that Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, that he stated that among our Shia, he says, what is the sign of our Shia? He says, our sign of Shia, that there's no one better than them. That if they're in a city, then that individual who follows us, who afdaluhum, he's the best of them. In other words, what? Kuntum awwal al-khair. Like the Imams. That if good is mentioned, oh, something good was done here. Where's the source of that? Where's the foundation of that? Who is the one who is promoting that good? The Ahlul Bayt are promoting that good in the case of Ahlul Bayt. But as followers of the Ahlul Bayt, that again, we should be those individuals that whatever is khair, whatever is good, that we're at the source of it. We're promoting it. We're supporting it. Whatever is good, whatever is khair. When we look towards the Quran with regards to that inspiration as well, what does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says about the believer? He actually gives that command. He says, فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ. فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ. What is it? He says, take the lead in establishing good. This is the command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And when He speaks about the believers, what does He say? He says, كَانُوا يُسَارِعُونَ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ. That the believers, that they're competing to do good. And if we instill this idea and this concept in our youth, فَاسْتَبِقُونَ الْخَيْرَاتِ. That means if they see something that needs to be done, something is good, we shouldn't have to ask them. They should be the ones who proceed. فَاسْتَبِقُونَ الْخَيْرَاتِ. That they lead and they go towards it. In fact, يُسَارِعُونَ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ. They should be competing with one another. We teach them that concept of competing with one another to do good, to do khair. And to also to be careful and to be very astute as to what is khair. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, He talks about this also in the Quran. He says, some people, He says, يُسَارِعُونَ إِلَى الْكُفْرِ. They compete to do what? To disbelief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Again, look at the world. That they're competing to be the furthest away from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Be the furthest away from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He wants from us. And those principles that the Prophet and his Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdal salatu has laid down. So we should be يُسَارِعُونَ فِي الْخَيْرَاتِ. And that khair is in our amal, that khair is in that which connects us to the deen. And don't be fooled that, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He points out in Surah Adiyat, He says, إِنَّهُ لِحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ. Some people are what? Al-insan is what? لِحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ. And here, khair doesn't mean good, it means wealth. They think wealth is good. That this is all the good, that all good is absorbed and engrossed in this wealth. وَإِنَّهُ لِحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ. And this is not khair. This is a dhimma. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's criticizing that if you think that that is good, it's not. And the reality of that will be made known to us on Yawm al-Qiyamah. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ خَيْرًا يَرَى. That whoever does an atom's weight of good, we will see it, we will know it. And that good and what truly is good, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has outlined in the Quran. We see it in the Sirat and Sunnah of Rasulullah and his Ahlul Bayt. وَمَنْ يَعْمَلْ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ شَرًّا يَرَى. And if we do an atom's weight of bad, then we will see that. If we are not following that Sirat and Sunnah of the Prophet and his Ahlul Bayt, and we're fooled and we think that something else is good, again, it will become very clear to us that what that good is and what is bad. There's simply 3 stories from the life of Imam Hadi alayhi very beautiful stories that shows that how the Imam alayhi he was what? He is that source of goodness. But not only source of goodness, as the Al-Jami' says, it says what? Assalamu alaikum ya sa'asat al-ibad. Ya sa'asat al-ibad. Sa'asat al-ibad means that that the Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdal, that they are the guides for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's servants. And every creation, every human being is what? The abd of Allah. Whether they recognize it or whether they don't. And that khair that the Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdal that they put forth was for everyone, not just simply those who followed the Imam. And unfortunately, sometimes we, as followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdal, we say, oh, well, yes, Ahlul Bayt are exclusively for us. No. Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdal, they were sent forth for humanity. And this is why one of those examples where an individual in Baghdad by the name of Yunus ibn Yaqub, he was a Christian. Yunus ibn Yaqub, he was a Christian. Didn't believe in the Prophet or Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdal. But he had a neighbor. His neighbor was Shia, follower of the Ahlul Bayt, follower of Imam Hadi alayhi afdal. And so Yunus ibn Yaqub, apparently he was very staunch in his faith, promoting his faith as well. Again, under the Islamic government, you can't really promote your faith. It's like, you have to, there are parameters, there are conditions. As I said, that also they implemented this ghiyar, that you have to distinguish yourself if you're a Christian or Jew. Whatever it was that he didn't observe, he was summoned by mutawakkil. And at that time, people knew that, if mutawakkil summons you, then that's it. Either you're going to be arrested, you may be exiled, you may even be killed. That something is wrong, that he's called you. You have to come. So Yunus ibn Yaqub, he was summoned to mutawakkil, to Samara. So before he left, he spoke to his neighbor who was a Shia. He says, listen, he was like, you guys, you make a nazar, you do this thing where you seek guidance and actually help and spiritual help from your Imam. And so he asks his neighbor, he says, can I do the same thing? My goodness, neighbor was someone who knew, he understood that, look, that the Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdal salam, sasatul ibad. Allah didn't send them just for us as Shia, send them for humanity in their entirety. So he said yes. So this Christian, Yunus ibn Yaqub, he says, okay. He says, I will vow, he made another, that I will give 100 dirham to Imam Hadi. To give, in charity, to do whatever he wants. Whatever he sees fit. So he says, that's what he intended before he left for Samara. So he took his camel and went towards Samara. But as he was going in Samara, he was like, I don't know where Imam Hadi lives. And he decided, like as he came into Samara, he says, perhaps just to be safe, I'll give the money to Ali ibn Hadi, Ali ibn Muhammad Al-Hadi. I'll give it to Ali sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'll give it to him before I even go see Mutawakkil. Of course, when you do another, usually you wait until, okay, you're safe, or whatever happened, and that's what he wanted. I wanted safety. And then you fulfilled another. But he says, no, I'm going to give it beforehand. But he didn't know. He says, well, maybe I'll ask someone when I get into Samara. He said his camel came into Samara, and it went through the streets. He said he couldn't even control it at one point, and it stopped at a door. Stopped at a door. He was like trying to make his camel move, it wouldn't move. And just a few seconds later, someone came out the door, one of the servants of Imam Hadi, alayhi salam. He says, Yunus ibn Yaqub, he says, come in. He says, you've reached to the house of Imam Hadi, alayhi salam. He says, come. And so he entered. Imam Hadi, alayhi salam, greeted him by his name. He says, you may give your another, you made this vow, just give the amount that you said you make your vow, and you will be safe. Don't worry about it. You will go to Mutawakkil, nothing will happen, and you will leave. So from this guy was surprised that Imam Hadi alayhi knew everything about what that another was about. Yunus ibn Yaqub went, visited, and left. Yunus ibn Yaqub didn't become Muslim, didn't become Shia, although he saw those miraculous things. But Imam Hadi alayhi he says that from the offsprings of Yunus ibn Yaqub, that his children will become Muslim. And he did. They became Muslim, they became followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhi. Like years later, one of the grandsons or sons of Yunus ibn Yaqub, he wrote a poem. He says that هذا من, he says, the statement at the call of my Mullah, Imam Hadi. He never saw Imam Hadi, but he knew what his grandfather did, that he went to visit. And he knew that Imam Hadi alayhi said the children and the offspring of Yunus will become Muslim. Another very beautiful story, Abdul Rahman Asfahani. So this is another individual. He was not Shia, he was Sunni. At that time, he was Sunni and then wasn't a follower of Ahlul Bayt alayhim. And this individual was a young man at that time, and he came, young man, able-bodied, but unfortunately he couldn't find work. He was having a very difficult time. So he was able to scrape up some money just to go to Samara. He said, well, this is the Khalifa, Mutawakkil. And I will go and I will visit, and I will ask him that at least for something, some zakat, something that, will help me, because I'm strong and able, even if I have to take a loan, qaruz hasana, that I can pay it back so that I can work. So as he reached to Samara, there was a lot of people around the governor's house, around the Khalifa's home, around Mutawakkil's home. And so he asked, what's going on here? So someone told him, says that the Shia Imam, Ali Al-Hadi, that he's been summoned to Mutawakkil. And some were saying that we think he wants to kill him. And so he waited. He was like, well, this is going to happen first. And then, so he waited. And when he saw Imam Hadi, alayhi he was awestruck by Imam Hadi. He was like, wow, subhanAllah, this person with such an luminous face. Then he said, in his heart, he said that, oh Allah, he says, don't let Mutawakkil harm this person, the son of Rasulullah. He said, I said it in my heart. He says, as the horse of Imam Hadi came close, he said, Imam Hadi turned towards him. He says, Ya Abdurrahman. He says that you will be safe. He said, Ya Abdurrahman. He says, you will have a long life. You will have many children. And you will be very wealthy. He says, Allah has answered your dua. And so I made this dua for you that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives you wealth, gives you many children, and gives you a long life. And so Imam Hadi went in, and he came out. Again, of course, he didn't need the dua of Abdurrahman, but Imam Hadi said that Allah answered your dua. I won't be harmed. He says, Abdurrahman, at that point, he said, even when he saw Imam Hadi come out, and Imam Hadi said this, he almost fainted, and he left. He says, well, since this individual, this luminous individual made this dua, he says, I don't need to see Mutawakkil. He returned to Isfahan, and slowly this guy became very wealthy. In fact, when he narrated this incident that happened, he was like more than 80 years old. He didn't narrate it right away, but he saw that exactly that this dua happened. The most richest individual in Isfahan was Abdurrahman. He was like, and how did I become wealthy? It was the dua of Imam Hadi alayhi salatu wasalam. And even Mutawakkil, subhanAllah. Mutawakkil, at one point in his life, he became very ill. And some of the people around Mutawakkil, in fact, in one of the narrations, it said actually the mother of Mutawakkil came to Imam Hadi alayhi salatu wasalam and said, look, my son is sick. He's ill. What should I do? Make a dua or something. So Imam Hadi alayhi salatu wasalam says, look, here, take some water, recite this over the water, and then he will be okay. Have him to drink this water. Mutawakkil, who is the enemy of Imam Hadi alayhi salatu wasalam, that even he prayed for his shafa'ah. And when you say that the Ahlul Bayt alayhim salatu wasalam, in dhukir al-khayr, kuntum awwalahu wa aslahu, wa ma'adinahu, wa muntahahu. SubhanAllah, that they wanted khayr, goodness for whom? For the entire creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But sometimes, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that some people, again the believers, yusari'un fil khayr, fil khayrat, that they hasten, they compete towards good. But unfortunately there are those who yusari'un fil kufr, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says. Mutawakkil was one of these individuals, that if you know that, and he was informed, at one point Mutawakkil was informed that it was Imam Hadi alayhi salatu, his dua, but that shafa that he gave to him, what to recite. But yet still, that didn't change him. That didn't change. SubhanAllah. And imagine, SubhanAllah, that just think about it. The du'as of the Ahlul Bayt, that one becomes wealthy, has many children, lives a long life because of the dua of the Imam. One gains the shafa of the Imam, that khayr, that goodness, but it doesn't change his heart. His heart becomes even more harsh. To the point that Imam Hadi alayhi salatu wasalam, he makes dua against Mutawakkil. And we read the history, again, the history not written by us, that what state that did Mutawakkil die in? And what state did Mutawakkil die in? SubhanAllah. In fact, if you read that dua safe of Imam Hadi alayhi salatu wasalam, and you read that history, you'll say, SubhanAllah. But that dua as well, parts of it is kind of heart-wrenching as well when you think of it, that what the Imam is saying. And just simply, I'll say tonight is a night of dua, a night of tawassul. The eve of the shahadat of Imam Hadi alayhi salatu wasalam, inshallah, simply we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make Imam Hadi alayhi salatu wasalam our intermediary, our wasila. But inshallah that Imam Hadi alayhi salatu wasalam, he makes dua on our behalf for our hajat. Not dua against us. That we say that we are Shia and we're not his Shia, but we ask that as the lovers of Ahlul Bayt, as a lover of Imam Hadi alayhi salatu wasalam, that we ask Allah that have the Imam to make dua for ourselves. يا أبا الحسن يا أبا الحسن يا علي بن محمد أيها الحال النقي يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. Allah, we have many hajat. We have family members who are sick and ill. We have those who are faced with difficulties. We have many hajat, Ya Allah. Our brothers and sisters in Palestine and Lebanon, they have hajat from you, Allah. We can't forget them as well. وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا. We ask that Imam Al-Hadi be our wasila. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. O Allah, make Imam Al-Hadi our wasila and the one who gives shafa'ah, the one who makes dua to you on our behalf. He's the one who's most closer to you. He's closer to you than we are. That our hajat are filled. And one of our greatest hajat is the return of the Imam of our time, so that he can establish justice in this world as it has been filled with injustice. And injustice that we saw also during the time of Imam Al-Hadi, to the point that he made dua against Mutawakkil al-Abbasi. And this is although that Mu'taz, he was the one who had murdered the Imam, who had poisoned Imam Al-Hadi. But Imam Al-Hadi had faced so much difficulties from Mutawakkil that he made this dua. But this dua as well, it shows us, it opens the door to the musibat of Imam Al-Hadi. He prayed to you, Ya Allah, Allahumma inni wa fulan ibn fulan abdani min abidik. He said, Oh Allah, that I am this servant of yours, Mutawakkil, and today the Zalimeen, we can put their names there too, that we are simply servants of you, Allah. We cannot be beyond that. That, oh Allah, we are your servants. That if Allah, oh Allah, you've placed us in different status. إن جعلتني فلان ابن فلان علي قدرة فظلمني بها وبغى علي بمكانها. That, oh Allah, we are just your servants. You're the one who has power over both of us. But you have given one power over me, and he's abused that power, he's abused that authority by oppressing me and doing me wrong. Listen to what Imam Hadi says. وَظَلَمَنِي بِهَا وَبَغَى عَلَيَّ بِمَكَانِهَا فَقَصَدَنِي بِمَكْرُوحٍ عَجَزْتُ عَنِ الصَّبْرِ عَلَيْهِ. He said, Oh Allah, that the authority and the dhulm and the oppression that and the harm that he's afflicted against me is reached to a point that I'm unable to bear. That what did Mutawakkil do to Imam Hadi? That he's making this dua. He said, Ya Allah, the Imams are those who are sabbar, they are the ones who are patient. But Imam Hadi, he says, I've lost my patience because of the oppression. عجزت عن الصبر عليه وتعمدني بشر ضعفت عن احتمالي ولم أقدر على الاستنصاف منه لضعفي ولا على الاستنصار لقلتي وذلي. He says, Ya Allah, not only have I lost my patience against the affliction and harm, but oh Allah, that I've been subjugated to such harshness and such wickedness that I'm unable to bear what is going on. ضعفت عن احتمالي. What is that thing that Imam Hadi, he was not able to bear? As we said in the seerah of Ahlul Bayt, they were very patient. If someone did something against them, they were patient against those. But what they cannot stand and what they cannot bear is that when people cross the line, when their aim was to destroy Islam, that what did they do? Perhaps it was the destruction of Karbala, the shrine of Imam Hussein, that Imam Hadi says, oh Allah, this is too much. That my grandfather, he's gone through so much before. On the plains of Karbala, when he stood alone, he said, Hal min nasirin yansuruna. He called out for help. He cried out for help. There was no one for him. That, oh Allah, this is unbearable to watch. Perhaps that's what Imam Hadi, he meant it. He said, oh Allah, I am too weak to bear the pain that I see. وَلَمْ أَقْدِرُ عَلَى الْإِسْتِنْسَافِ مِنْهُ. And I cannot obtain justice for myself or for anyone. But listen to the reason why Imam Hadi says he cannot obtain justice. He says, لِضَعَفِي. He says, oh Allah, I am weak, so I cannot obtain justice for myself. وَلَا عَلَى الْإِسْتِنْصَارِ لِقِلَّتِي. He says, oh Allah, I cannot call out for help for someone to help me in this situation because the believers are so few. We're so few and we're being so suppressed, meaning that in the time of Imam Hadi, that look how lucky Imam Hussein was. At least he had 72 companions, 72 that would sacrifice themselves for their Imam. But in the time of Imam Hadi, he says, I cannot even call out for help like my grandfather. Hal min nasirin yansuruna liqillati wa dha'afi wa dhulli. That Imam Hussein, at least he had 72 who stood with him. There was a point that they became shaheed though. And Imam Hussein, he stood alone. And he made that cry, هل من ناصر ينصرنا وهل من مغيث يغيثنا. But Imam Hadi, he had no one. And this was against Mutawakkil, not the one who killed him, not the one who martyred him. So if that was in the time of Mutawakkil, that how bad was the state in the time of Mu'taz al-La'in, who poisoned the Imam. And then Imam, he went and returned back to Allah. That time, they said that when Imam Hassan al-Askari, that it must have been so bad that when Imam Hassan al-Askari, that when he went out to mourn for his father, they said he had taken off his amama, that he had no abba on, and he walked barefoot. Some said that, why are you walking this way? Why you don't have your amama? Why don't you have your abba? They said that Musa, that when his brother Harun has passed, he went out in the same manner. And this is my father. This is Imam Al-Hadi. This is Imam Al-Ma'soom. This is the one who guided humanity. إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون وسيعلم الذين ظلموا أي منقلب ينقلبون. اللهم بحق هذا المجلس العلوي اغفر ذنوبنا واستر عيوبنا وقضي حوائجنا واشف مرضانا وارحم أمواتنا وعجل فرج مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان واجعلنا من أعوانه وانصاره والمستشهدين بين يديه وتحت لوائه بحق محمد وآله الطاهرين.
السلام عليك يا أبا الحسن علي بن محمد الزكي الراشد النور الثاقب ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليك يا سفي الله، السلام عليك يا سر الله، السلام عليك يا حبل الله، السلام عليك يا آل الله، السلام عليك يا خيرة الله، السلام عليك يا صفة الله، السلام عليك يا أمين الله، السلام عليك يا حق الله، السلام عليك يا حبيب الله، السلام عليك يا نور الأنوار، السلام عليك يا زين الأبرار، السلام عليك يا سبيل الأخيار، السلام عليك يا عنصر الأظهار، السلام عليك يا حجة الرحمن، السلام عليك يا ركن الإيمان، السلام عليك يا مولى المؤمنين، السلام عليك يا ولي الصالحين، السلام عليك يا علم الهدى، السلام عليك يا حليف التقى، السلام عليك يا عمود الدين، السلام عليك يا ابن خاتم النبيين، السلام عليك يا ابن سيد الوسيين، السلام عليك يا ابن فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين، السلام عليك أيها الأمين الوفي، السلام عليك أيها العلم الرضي، السلام عليك أيها الزاهد التقي، السلام عليك أيها الحجة على الخلق أجمعين، السلام عليك أيها التالي للقرآن، السلام عليك أيها المبين للحلال من الحرام، السلام عليك أيها الولي الناصح، السلام عليك أيها الطريق الواضح، السلام عليك أيها النجم اللائح. أشهد يا مولاي يا أبا الحسن أنك حجة الله على خلقه، وخليفته في بريته، وأمينه في بلاده، وشاهده على عباده، وأشهد أنك كلمة التقوى وباب الهدى والعروة الوثقى، والحجة على من فوق الأرض ومن تحت الثرى، وأشهد أنك المطهر من الذنوب، المبرأ من العيوب، والمختص بكرامة الله، والمحبوب بحجة الله، والموهوب له كلمة الله، والركن الذي يلجأ إليه العباد وتحيا به البلاد. وأشهد يا مولاي أني بك وبآبائك وأبنائك موقن مقر، ولكم تابع في ذات نفسي وشرائع ديني وخاتمه عملي ومنقلبي ومثواي، وأني ولي لمن والاكم وعدو لمن عاداكم، مؤمن بسركم وعلانيتكم وأولكم وآخركم، بأبي أنت وأمي، والسلام عليك ورحمة الله وبركاته.